Hey everybody, Mr. Moffin coming back at you again with another APGov topic 3.10 video focusing in on civil rights. Now, previously we've taken a look at some aspects of civil rights as it pertains to African Americans, but today in this video we're going to be switching gears. We're going to be taking a look at the application of civil rights for women in this country. And similar to other, quote-unquote suspect categories like people of color and members of the LGBT community, etc., we also have a history of lack of equity for women in this country. And, I know most of you are probably familiar with this, but just a quick review of some of these traditional problems and issues that women were having to face historically. Going way back in time, especially to the 19th century, the use of what was known as coverture as a legal doctrine. The idea being that for women, way back historically, the idea being is that women really did not have true independent legal citizenship, for lack of a better term. The idea being is that a woman's property is to be managed by a man, be it her father, her husband, her sons, etc. That the general attitude is that women were not viewed as capable and therefore entitled to have independence over their own property and liberty in many respects. And of course, this is going to go hand in hand with just the general lack of opportunity equally for women in our society historically. That women had been denied the right to vote, been denied to own property outright, limited access to education, locked out of the highest paying jobs, the most jobs with the most responsibility in terms of employees, and just we kind of boil this down, once again, just a reminder that we're talking about women being historically stereotyped in very negative ways. The idea being that a woman is not smart enough to be able to handle things like math and science, and that women, do not have true leadership skills that men would respect in the world of business or government and things like that. That a woman, really only exists to serve the purpose of managing the home, raising children, and this, is going to be, as you can imagine, very, very limiting in terms of opportunities and the ability to enjoy equal rights as a woman. Now, that being said, still in the 19th century, we are going to see a movement by women to, fight for equality. Now, part of this is going to be stemmed in growing involvement in social reform movements of the early 19th century, like the temperance movement and the abolition movement and things like that. But because of women starting to have more of a public role in society dealing with political issues, you're going to see the first real organized attempt to fight for suffrage rights, once again, voting rights. And we'll see this, first probably famously manifested at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, which is going to be seeing women's rights leaders of the time coming together with a handful of male allies as well, such as people like Frederick Douglass, that is going to be organizing an attempt to, kind of show that women are being and have historically been denied equality in society, and that it is not fair, it is not just, it is not right. And the publication of the Declaration of Sentiments, for those of you that are not familiar, is patterned off of the Declaration of Independence from 1776. And, the language and the organizing of the letter, of the document is very similar to the Declaration of Independence, but instead of the idea that all men are created equally, it will say that all men and women are created equally. And that it wasn't in the case of, 1776, England violating our rights, our natural rights. In this 1848 Declaration of Sentiments, it's men that are violating the rights of women. And, just like in the Declaration of Independence, it wasn't just this general kind of statement with no evidence to back it up. The 1776 Declaration of Independence, the bottom two-thirds of it is really pointing out very specific examples of how Britain had violated our natural rights as colonists. Well, in the Declaration of Sentiments, it's going to be the same thing. But in this case, it's going to be example after example after example of men historically denying rights to women. So this is going to be a very bold statement that women's civil rights leaders are going to be promoting at this critical time. Now, that being said, moving forward, it's still going to be a very, very long haul to be able to actually manifest change, to actually get more rights in society, particularly regarding suffrage. And as we go through the latter half of the 19th century and into the beginning of the 20th century, you'll see more and more use of protests to fight for change. It might be Susan B. Anthony, literally trying to just go vote and paying a fine, being arrested for actually trying to vote as a woman. It could be the use of hunger strikes, like Alice Paul will be organizing. It certainly will involve the use of creating interest groups like NASA, for example. But probably the most common form of protest will be the use of picketing and protest marches, as you can see here. Especially as we get into the 20th century. By the time we get to the beginning of the 20th century, several states out west had already allowed for women to be able to vote, but there still was not a national protection for it. And so you're starting to see more and more women organize nonviolent protest marches in the streets, getting the public's attention on it, getting the media's attention on it. As you can see here in this example, this is calling out President Woodrow Wilson, saying, hey, what are you going to do about women's suffrage? During World War I, there were, those that were involved in pickets that, would hold signs that would be talking about, how can we go fight in Europe in the name of defending freedom, which is what President Wilson was saying, but at the same time not protecting the rights of women here at home. So, this suffragette protest picketing movement is going to take on more and more steam. And note, when you couple this with the tremendous role that women will play in World War I in terms of serving as nurses, as truck drivers, as, critical aspects of the war effort, this is going to culminate in some very important achievements for women with regards to voting rights and involvement in government. For example, in 1916, we're going to be seeing Jeannette Rankin pictured here be the first woman ever elected to Congress from the state of Montana. And note, once again, shouldn't be a surprise. It's really Western states that are going to be on the vanguard of promoting gender equity, at least with regards to voting rights. Wyoming becomes the first state to allow women the right to vote, getting the nickname the Equality State. Why Western states? Well, at a time where the frontier was being developed and, all hands were needed on deck, so to speak, to create these new communities, women played a vital role. So, there's a sense amongst men that, women really are equals in terms of creating a community. Therefore, women should be able to have the right to vote and serve in government and things like that. But note, the biggest achievement for women's suffrage is obviously going to be the 19th Amendment, which will be ratified in 1920. And note, this is not that long ago. I mean, we're just at about 100 years since this happened. And to give you a sense of how relatively recent this achievement was, I remember when I was a kid back in the 1980s and my grandmother telling me stories about suffragettes and how women could not vote, that she personally remembered women not being able to vote. So, it's a very, very, relatively modern achievement, and so that's important to keep in mind. Now, note, gaining suffrage rights is certainly not going to be the only issue that women are going to be facing in terms of trying to fight for equality. A lot of it still to this day is focused on achieving equality in the workplace. We know historically that women were paid a fraction of what men would make, usually about half of what men would make, similar to what a minor would make in comparison to an adult male. And once again, that kind of shows the lack of respect in terms of what men traditionally as business owners viewed women were capable of. Now, we did see an important achievement be made in the Kennedy administration with the passage of the Equal Pay Act, which will then stipulate that women cannot be discriminated against in terms of pay. And note, basically, if there is evidence that a woman has been paid less than a man for the same job, same experience, etc., there is a period of time that women can file a lawsuit and claim damages and back pay for that discrimination. Now, we're going to come back to this later on because there's a time limit on this. And one of the flaws that we're going to see in this law is that time limit's pretty narrow. And if you don't capitalize on that, realization of being denied equality in terms of pay soon enough, you could lose out. But we'll come back to that later. But something else that is going to be noticeably important, in addition to some of the actions we've already talked about, and similar to other minority groups, women are also going to be organizing critical interest groups, such as in this case in the 1960s, NOW, the National Organization of Women. And what has NOW historically done? Well, NOW has historically focused on issues that are specific to women, be it equality in the workplace, access to reproductive freedom, trying to change the narrative in this country in terms of, what a woman is able to do and what is she is quote unquote supposed to be able to do, breaking down these gender norms and gender roles that had denied women equality. And also, fighting the idea of women being viewed as being objectified sexually. That, in other words, women should be entitled to the same level of respect and equality in all aspects of government, aspects of health, aspects of social norms, etc., as a man. And that simply being of a different gender should not deny a woman equal opportunities. And the work of NOW has shown tremendous effects. Think of, the roles that women have today that would have been inconceivable 50 years ago. The idea that a woman is Speaker of the House. The idea that there are, female CEOs that are in the Fortune 500. That you have, for example, just watching the other day on television, female referees in the NBA and the NFL. You've got female troop leaders in the Boy Scouts. Female construction workers, police officers, firefighters. You name it. Women are, showing, opportunities in these various areas. Now, is it perfect? Certainly not. We've not seen total gender equity. For example, we still have not had a female president, for example, but, NOW has played a critical role in a lot of that. So note, when we talk about some of these other achievements down the line, understand that NOW is going to play a critical role in that. So, all right, we're going to leave it there for right now. When we come back next time, we're going to take a look at some other aspects of civil rights issues for women, particularly in the last few decades. So we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.